The door to the nursery flew open with a crash. Eleanor dropped the book she was reading and jumped to her feet. Her heart pounded as the Earl of Ashford filled the doorway. His face was dark with rage. "You have 1 hour," he said. His voice was cold and sharp like winter ice. "Pack your things and leave my house." Eleanor's mouth went dry. She had known this day would come. She had always known. But not today. Please, not today. "My lord, she started to say. 1 hour, Miss Eleanor, not a moment more." He turned to go. That was when she heard it. A small, pained cry from the corner of the room. The Earl heard it too. He froze in the doorway. Eleanor moved without thinking. She ran to the corner where young Thomas huddled on the floor. The boy's face was pale and twisted with pain. Blood soaked through his torn shirt sleeve. "Thomas!" She dropped to her knees beside the child. "What happened?" The boy was crying. His whole body shook. "I fell from the oak tree," he whispered. "I was trying to reach the bird's nest. I wanted to see the babies." Eleanor looked up at the Earl. He stood frozen in the doorway. His face had changed. The anger was gone. Now he looked lost, confused, almost afraid. "Go," he said quietly. "Leave him. The servants will tend to him." But Eleanor was already rolling up the boy's sleeve. The cut was deep and jagged. It ran from his elbow to his wrist. Blood dripped onto the wooden floor. "This needs care now, my lord," she said. Her voice was steady even though her hands shook. "It cannot wait." The Earl took a step forward. Then he stopped. He seemed unable to move closer to his own son. Eleanor understood. She had lived in this house for 6 months. She had watched the Earl avoid his child. She had seen the pain in his eyes whenever Thomas came near. Everyone knew why. The boy's mother had died bringing him into the world 3 years ago. "I need clean water," Eleanor said, "and bandages, and whiskey if you have it." The Earl just stared at her. She had spoken to him like an equal. No one spoke to the Earl of Ashford that way. "Please, my lord," she added softly. "He is in pain." Something broke in the Earl's face. He turned and shouted down the hallway. "Mrs. Davis, bring water and bandages to the nursery at once." Then he left. His footsteps echoed down the hall, fast, running away. Eleanor turned back to Thomas. "It will be all right," she whispered. "I promise. This will hurt a bit, but then you will feel better." The boy nodded. Tears ran down his cheeks. "Are you leaving, Miss Eleanor? Is father sending you away?" Her throat tightened. "Hush now. Let us worry about your arm first." Mrs. Davies arrived with the supplies. The old housekeeper's face was grim. "His lordship is in his study," she said quietly. "Drinking. He always drinks when the boy is hurt." Eleanor said nothing. She focused on Thomas. First, she cleaned the wound. The boy cried out but tried to be brave. Then she pressed clean cloth against the cut to stop the bleeding. "You are very brave," she told him. "Braver than most grown men I know." "Really?" Thomas sniffled. "Really. I once knew a soldier who fainted at the sight of his own blood. You are much braver than he was." Thomas almost smiled. "Tell me about the soldier," he said. So Eleanor told him stories while she worked. She spoke of her childhood in the country, of her father who had been a country doctor. She had watched him tend wounds 100 times before he died. Her mother had followed him to the grave within a year. After that, Eleanor had gone to live with her aunt and uncle. That had been the beginning of her troubles. Her aunt, Lady Catherine, had 3 daughters of her own. All of them were beautiful and accomplished. Eleanor was none of these things. She was plain and quiet. She liked to read books and take long walks. These were not useful skills for catching a husband. "You are 23 years old," her aunt would say. "Past your prime. No man will want you now." Her uncle agreed. "You are a burden to this family," he told her often. "You eat our food and wear our clothes and give nothing back." Eleanor had tried to be useful. She had helped care for her young cousins. She had mended clothes and arranged flowers. She had done everything asked of her, but it was never enough. Finally, her aunt had found this position, a governess for the young son of the Earl of Ashford. The Earl was a widower. He lived alone in his great house with his son and his servants. He needed someone to care for the boy. "It is your last chance," her aunt had said. "If you fail at this, you will end up in the poorhouse. We will not take you back." Eleanor had come to Ashford Manor 6 months ago. At first, the Earl had barely spoken to her. He avoided the nursery. He took his meals alone. He spent his days managing his estate and his evenings in his study with his books and his brandy. But Eleanor had grown to love young Thomas. The boy was sweet and curious. He asked endless questions about the world. He loved stories and songs. He reminded her of her own childhood before her parents died. She had thought she was doing well. Thomas was learning his letters. He could read simple words now. He was healthy and happy. But apparently the Earl thought otherwise. Eleanor finished wrapping Thomas's arm. The bleeding had stopped. The bandage was clean and tight. "There," she said. "All done. How do you feel?" "It hurts," Thomas admitted, "but not as much." "It will hurt less each day," Eleanor promised. "You must keep it clean and dry. No climbing trees for at least a week." "But Miss Eleanor, the baby birds—" "Will be there when you are healed," she said firmly. "Birds grow slowly. You will see them before they fly away." Thomas nodded. His eyes were heavy. The pain and tears had exhausted him. "Rest now," Eleanor said. She helped him into his bed and pulled the covers up to his chin. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" he asked. Eleanor's heart broke. "Of course." She sat beside his bed and held his good hand. She hummed a soft tune her mother used to sing. Within minutes, Thomas was asleep. Eleanor stood up carefully. Her legs were stiff from kneeling. She looked around the nursery. This had been her home for 6 months. Her room was just through that door, small but clean, better than anything her aunt had given her. Now it was over. She had 1 hour to pack, less than that now, perhaps 40 minutes. But she found she could not move. She looked down at Thomas sleeping peacefully. His injured arm rested on top of the covers. The white bandage stood out against the blue blanket. Someone cleared their throat behind her. Eleanor spun around. The Earl stood in the doorway again. He looked different now. The anger was gone. His face was pale. His eyes were red. He smelled of whiskey, but he did not seem drunk. "How is he?" the Earl asked quietly. "He will be fine, my lord," Eleanor said. She kept her voice low so as not to wake Thomas. The cut was deep but clean. It should heal well if kept clean. The Earl nodded. He took a step into the room, then another. He moved slowly, like a man walking through water. He came to stand beside the bed and looked down at his son. Eleanor held her breath. She had never seen the Earl stand so close to Thomas before. "He looks like her," the Earl said. His voice was rough. "His mother. He has her eyes, her smile." Eleanor did not know what to say, so she said nothing. "I cannot bear it sometimes," the Earl continued, looking at him, seeing her face in his, knowing she died so he could live. "My lord," Eleanor started. "No," the Earl held up a hand. "Let me speak. I have been a coward. I know this. I have avoided my own son for 3 years. What kind of father does that make me?" "A grieving one," Eleanor said softly. The Earl looked at her sharply. His eyes were dark grey, almost black in the dim light. "You do not judge me." "It is not my place to judge, my lord, but you think I am wrong. You think I should be a better father." Eleanor chose her words carefully. "I think Thomas is a wonderful boy. I think he loves you very much. I think he would be happy to know you even a little." The Earl looked back at his son. His throat moved as he swallowed hard. "I am afraid," he admitted. "What if he asks about her?" What if he wants to know how she died? How can I tell him that I killed her? You did not kill her, my lord. Childbirth is dangerous. Many women die. It is not your fault. She did not want another child, the Earl said. I was the one who wanted an heir. I convinced her. I told her it would be fine. And then she died in agony, screaming my name, begging me to save her. But I could do nothing. I just stood there and watched her die. Tears ran down his face. The great Earl of Ashford was crying. Eleanor felt her own tears rise. I am so sorry, she whispered. They stood there together in silence. The only sound was Thomas's soft breathing. Finally, the Earl wiped his face with the back of his hand. Why did you stay? He asked. I told you to leave. I gave you 1 hour to pack. But you stayed to help him. Eleanor looked at Thomas. He needed me more than I needed to pack. The Earl studied her face. You care for him. Very much, my lord. Why? The question surprised her. Why should I not? He is a sweet child. But you have only known him 6 months. 6 months is long enough to love someone, Eleanor said, especially a child. The Earl shook his head slowly. I have had him for 3 years, and I feel nothing but pain when I see him. Perhaps you feel too much, Eleanor suggested gently. Perhaps the pain is so great because the love is so great underneath it. The Earl stared at her. Who are you? He asked. Where did you come from? Eleanor almost smiled. I came from my aunt's house in London, my lord. You hired me through an agency. Do you not remember? I remember a quiet girl in a gray dress, the Earl said. I remember thinking you looked sad, but I did not care. I just needed someone to keep Thomas alive and out of my sight. The words stung. Eleanor looked down at her hands. I see. But I was wrong, the Earl continued. You are not just a quiet girl. You are brave. You stood up to me. You disobeyed my order. You put my son's needs above your own. Any decent person would have done the same, my lord. No, the Earl said firmly. Most people would have obeyed me. They would have left the room and let the servants handle it. But you stayed. You knelt on the floor and got blood on your dress. You comforted him. You stopped his pain. Eleanor looked down at her dress. He was right. There was blood on the grey fabric. She had not even noticed. I will pay to have it cleaned, my lord, she said. The Earl made a sound that was almost a laugh. You still think I am sending you away? Eleanor's head snapped up. Are you not? The Earl was quiet for a long moment. He looked at Thomas again. Then he looked at Eleanor. Why did I come to the nursery today? He asked. Why did I storm in here and tell you to leave? Eleanor blinked. I do not know, my lord. I thought perhaps I had done something wrong. No, the Earl said. You had done something right. That was the problem. I do not understand. The Earl moved to the window. He looked out over his estate. This morning I was in my study. The window was open. I heard laughter coming from the gardens, so I looked out, and I saw you and Thomas playing in the flowers. He was chasing you. You were laughing. He caught you and you both fell down on the grass. You were laughing so hard, both of you. He looked so happy. The Earl's voice got quieter. I have not heard my son laugh like that since he was a baby, since his mother was still alive. And I realized that you had done in 6 months what I could not do in 3 years. You had made him happy. You had become what he needed, and I hated you for it. Eleanor's breath caught. My lord. I hated you because you showed me what a failure I am, the Earl said. You showed me that my son does not need me. He needs someone who can love him, and I am not that person. That is not true, Eleanor said. Thomas needs his father. He asks about you every day. He wonders why you do not visit him. He thinks he has done something wrong. The Earl turned from the window. His face was full of pain. He thinks that? Yes, my lord. I have tried to explain that you are busy with important work, but he is only 3. He does not understand. He just knows his father does not want to see him. The Earl closed his eyes. God, what have I done? Eleanor took a step toward him. She forgot about propriety. She forgot about the difference in their stations. She just saw a man in pain. It is not too late, she said. You can still know him. You can still be his father. I do not know how, the Earl admitted. I do not know what to say to him. I do not know how to play with a child. My own father was cold and distant. I have no example to follow. Then follow your heart, Eleanor said. Talk to him about things you love. Show him your horses. Read him a book. It does not have to be complicated. Children just want your time and attention. The Earl looked at her with something like wonder. You make it sound so simple. It is simple, Eleanor said. Love is always simple. It is fear that makes it complicated. The Earl was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Will you help me? Eleanor was not sure she had heard him correctly. Help you, my lord? Will you teach me how to be a father to my son? The Earl's voice was humble. Will you stay? Not just as his governess, but as someone who can help me find my way back to him. Eleanor's heart pounded. You are not sending me away? No, the Earl said. I am asking you to stay. I am asking you to forgive my cruelty today. I was wrong to order you to leave. I was angry at myself and I took it out on you. Can you forgive me? Eleanor had been told many times that she was worthless. Her aunt and uncle had made sure she knew she was a burden. No one had ever asked her to stay before. No one had ever said they needed her. Yes, she whispered. I can forgive you, my lord, and I will stay. For Thomas. The Earl nodded. For Thomas, he repeated. Then he added, and perhaps in time you can teach me to be something other than a bitter, lonely man. Eleanor looked at him, really looked at him. She had thought he was cold and cruel, but now she saw the truth. He was broken. He was lost. He was drowning in grief and did not know how to swim to shore. Perhaps we can both learn something, she said softly. The Earl met her eyes. For the first time he really saw her, not just a governess in a gray dress, but a person, a woman, someone with her own pain and her own strength. Perhaps we can, he said. They stood there in the quiet nursery with Thomas sleeping between them. Neither of them knew it yet, but something had changed. Something had begun. A door had opened that could never be closed again. The hour was up, but Eleanor was not packing her bags. She was staying. And somehow, that one decision would change everything. Over the following days, the house began to shift. Eleanor felt it like the change of seasons. Small things at first. The Earl asked her to bring Thomas to the stables one morning. He wanted to show his son the new foal that had been born in the night. Thomas was nervous at first. He held Eleanor's hand tightly as they walked across the lawn. Will father be angry? He asked. Did I do something wrong? No, darling, Eleanor said. Your father wants to spend time with you. He wants to show you something special. The Earl was waiting by the stable door. He looked nervous too. His hands kept moving, clenching and unclenching. When he saw them coming, he tried to smile. It was not a very good smile, but it was a start. Thomas, he said. His voice was too formal. I thought you might like to see the new horse. Thomas looked up at Eleanor. She nodded encouragingly. Go on, she whispered. The boy took a few steps toward his father. Then he stopped. The Earl looked at Eleanor helplessly. Eleanor gave him a gentle smile. Why not show him yourself, my lord? Take his hand and lead him to the stall. The Earl stared at her. Then he looked at his son. Slowly, carefully, he held out his hand. Come, Thomas, he said. His voice was softer now. She is very small and very sweet, just like you. Thomas's face lit up. He took his father's hand. Together they walked into the stable. Eleanor followed at a distance. The foal was beautiful, all long legs and big eyes. Thomas gasped with delight. "She is so little." "She was born last night," the Earl said. He sounded more natural now. "Would you like to touch her?" Thomas nodded eagerly. The Earl lifted him up so he could reach over the stall door. Thomas stretched out his hand. The foal sniffed his fingers curiously. Thomas giggled. "It tickles!" The Earl smiled, a real smile this time. "She likes you." "Can I name her?" Thomas asked. "Please, Father." The Earl's throat worked. Eleanor saw tears in his eyes. It was the first time Thomas had called him father in his presence. "Yes," the Earl said. His voice was thick. "You may name her. What would you like to call her?" Thomas thought hard. "Eleanor," he said finally. "After Miss Eleanor, because she is pretty and kind." Eleanor felt her own eyes fill with tears. The Earl looked at her over his son's head. His expression was unreadable. "That is a fine name," the Earl said quietly. "Eleanor it is." They spent an hour in the stables that morning. The Earl showed Thomas all the horses. He explained how to care for them. He let Thomas give them carrots and brush their soft noses. Thomas chatted happily the whole time. When they walked back to the house, Thomas was skipping between them. He held his father's hand on one side and Eleanor's on the other. He looked like the happiest child in the world. "Thank you," the Earl said to Eleanor when Thomas ran ahead to tell Mrs. Davies about the foal. "That was not as frightening as I expected." Eleanor smiled. "He is easy to love, my lord. You just have to let yourself try." The Earl studied her face. "You are very wise for someone so young." "I am not so young," Eleanor said. "I'm 23, practically a spinster." "Who told you that?" the Earl asked sharply. Eleanor looked away. "My aunt, my uncle, everyone really. It is the truth." "It is not the truth," the Earl said. "It is cruel nonsense. 23 is not old, and besides, age has nothing to do with worth." Eleanor looked at him in surprise. No one had ever defended her like that before. "You are kind to say so, my lord," she said. "I am not being kind," the Earl said. "I am being honest. Your family was wrong about you, very wrong." He walked away before Eleanor could respond. She stood there on the lawn, her heart beating strangely fast. More days passed. The Earl began joining them for meals. At first he was stiff and formal at the table, but Thomas's cheerful chatter slowly drew him out. Soon the Earl was telling stories of his own childhood. Thomas listened with wide eyes. Eleanor watched them together and felt something warm growing in her chest. The Earl was trying so hard. He was not perfect. Sometimes he said the wrong thing or looked uncomfortable. But he kept showing up. He kept trying. One evening, Eleanor was putting Thomas to bed when the Earl appeared in the doorway. This was new. He had never come to the nursery at bedtime before. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the bed. "Of course, my lord," Eleanor said. The Earl sat on the edge of the bed. Thomas looked at him with sleepy, happy eyes. "Will you tell me a story, father?" Thomas asked. "Miss Eleanor tells me stories every night, but I would like to hear one from you." The Earl looked panicked. "I do not know any stories," he said. "Tell him about when you were a boy," Eleanor suggested softly. "Tell him about something you loved to do." The Earl thought for a moment. Then he began to speak. "When I was your age, I had a dog," he said. "A big brown dog named Rex. He was my best friend." Thomas's eyes lit up. "Tell me more." So the Earl told him about Rex, about how they would run through the fields together, about how Rex would sleep at the foot of his bed every night, about how the dog had protected him from a wild boar once. Thomas hung on every word. When the story was done, he yawned widely. "Can I have a dog, father?" he asked sleepily. The Earl smiled. "Perhaps, when you are a bit older." "Promise?" Thomas's eyes were already closing. "I promise," the Earl said. Thomas fell asleep with a smile on his face. The Earl sat there for a moment, just looking at his son. Then he stood up carefully and followed Eleanor out of the room. In the hallway he said, "Thank you for suggesting the story. I did not think he would care about my childhood." "Children always want to know about their parents," Eleanor said. "It helps them understand who they are." The Earl nodded slowly. "I have missed so much," he said. 3 years of his life. I cannot get that time back. "No," Eleanor agreed. "But you have now, and you have all the years ahead." The Earl looked at her. The hallway was dim, lit only by a few candles. His face was half in shadow. "You have changed everything," he said quietly. "Do you know that?" Eleanor's breath caught. "My lord?" "When you came here, this house was dead," the Earl said. "I was dead. Moving through days but not living them. You brought life back. You brought Thomas back to me. You brought me back to myself." "I only cared for your son," Eleanor said. Her voice was shaky. "No," the Earl said. He took a step closer. "You did much more than that. You saw a broken man, and you did not turn away. You saw a grieving widower, and you showed him he could still be a father. You gave me hope when I had none." Eleanor did not know what to say. Her heart was pounding so loud she was sure he could hear it. "I do not know what I would have done if you had left that day," the Earl continued. "If you had packed your bags and walked away, I would have lost everything. My son, my chance at redemption, my—" He stopped. He looked like he wanted to say more but could not find the words. "Your what, my lord?" Eleanor whispered. The Earl shook his head. "It is too soon," he said. "I have no right. You are my employee. I am your master. It would not be proper." Eleanor's mind raced. What was he trying to say? What did he feel? But the Earl was already walking away. "Good night, Miss Eleanor," he called back. "Sleep well." Eleanor stood alone in the dark hallway. Her whole body was trembling. Something had just happened. Something important. But she was not sure what it meant. That night she lay awake for hours. She thought about the Earl's words. She thought about the way he had looked at her. She thought about the warmth in his voice when he thanked her. "No," she told herself firmly. "Do not be foolish. He is grateful, nothing more. He is a great lord. You are just a governess. He would never see you as anything else." But her heart would not listen to reason. Because something had changed. She had felt it. And she was terribly afraid that she was falling in love with the Earl of Ashford. The following weeks were the happiest of Eleanor's life. The house seemed lighter somehow. Thomas bloomed under his father's attention. The Earl smiled more. Even the servants noticed the change. "His lordship is like a different man," Mrs. Davies said one morning. "I have not seen him this way since before the mistress died. It is good to see him living again." Eleanor felt a mixture of pride and fear. She was glad the Earl was healing, but she was becoming more and more aware of her own feelings. Every time he smiled at her, her heart jumped. Every time their hands accidentally touched, she felt a jolt like lightning. Every time he said her name, she wanted to hear him say it again. This was dangerous. This was forbidden. She was nothing. He was everything. There could be no future for them. But knowing that did not stop her heart from hoping. One afternoon, a letter arrived. Mrs. Davies brought it to Eleanor with a worried face. "It is from London," she said. "From your aunt." Eleanor's hands shook as she opened it. She read the words once, then again, then a third time, hoping they would change. But they did not. Her cousin Margaret was getting married. It was a grand match, a viscount. The wedding would be in 1 month, and Eleanor was commanded to attend. Her aunt insisted. Eleanor's presence was required to help with preparations. "You have been hiding in the country long enough," her aunt wrote. "It is time you returned and made yourself useful. If you refuse, You need not bother coming back at all. We will consider you dead to this family." Eleanor sat down heavily. She felt sick. She did not want to go back to her aunt's house. She did not want to leave Thomas. And most of all, she did not want to leave the Earl. But if she refused, she would have nowhere to go if she ever lost this position. She would be completely alone in the world. "Bad news?" Mrs. Davies asked gently. "My cousin is getting married," Eleanor said. "My aunt wants me to come help with the wedding." "Will you go?" "I must." Eleanor folded the letter with shaking hands. "She is my only family. I cannot refuse." "But what about young Thomas and his lordship?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I will only be gone a month, perhaps less. They will manage without me for that short time." But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. A month felt like forever, and she was terribly afraid that if she left, something would break. The fragile happiness they had built would shatter. She had to tell the Earl. She found him in his study that evening. He was reading by the fire. He looked up and smiled when she knocked. "Miss Eleanor, come in. I was just thinking about you." Her heart skipped. "You were, my lord?" "Yes. I wanted to ask if you would join Thomas and me for a ride tomorrow. I thought we could have a picnic by the lake. The weather is supposed to be fine." Eleanor's throat tightened. "That sounds lovely, my lord. But I need to speak with you about something." The Earl saw her expression. His smile faded. "What is wrong?" "I received a letter from my aunt today," Eleanor said. She twisted her hands together. "My cousin is getting married. My aunt has commanded me to return to London to help with preparations." The Earl stood up quickly. "You are leaving?" "Only for a month, my lord. Perhaps less." "A month?" The Earl's face was pale. "When?" "As soon as possible. My aunt wants me there by the end of the week." The Earl turned away. He gripped the back of his chair. "I see." Eleanor waited. She wanted him to say something, to ask her not to go, to tell her she was needed here. But he said nothing. "I am sorry, my lord," she said quietly. "I know this is sudden, but I have no choice. She is my family." "Of course," the Earl said. His voice was tight. "You must go. Family is important." Eleanor felt tears threaten. "I will return as soon as I can, I promise. Thomas—" "Will be fine," the Earl interrupted. "We managed before you came. We will manage while you are gone." The words cut like knives. Eleanor took a step back. "Of course, my lord. I did not mean to suggest otherwise." The Earl turned around. His face was hard, closed off. "You should go pack. If you are leaving in a few days, you will need time to prepare." Eleanor wanted to say more. She wanted to explain that she did not want to go, that her heart was breaking at the thought of leaving. But his cold expression stopped her. "Yes, my lord," she said. She curtsied and left the room. Behind her, she did not see the Earl sink into his chair. She did not see him put his head in his hands. She did not hear him whisper, "Do not go. Please do not go." Eleanor cried herself to sleep that night. She told herself she was being foolish. The Earl was her employer, nothing more. Of course he would not beg her to stay. That was only in fairy tales. But a small, stubborn part of her heart had hoped for a fairy tale. And now that hope was crushed. The next few days were torture. Eleanor tried to prepare Thomas. "I have to go visit my family for a little while," she told him. "But I will come back, I promise." Thomas cried. "Do not go, Miss Eleanor. Stay with us. Father, tell her to stay." But the Earl just looked away. "Miss Eleanor must do her duty to her family," he said. "We cannot be selfish." Eleanor packed her few belongings. Mrs. Davies helped her. The housekeeper kept shaking her head and muttering about foolishness. On Eleanor's last evening, she went to tuck Thomas into bed one final time. The boy clung to her. "I will miss you so much," he sobbed. "I will miss you too," Eleanor said. Tears ran down her face. But I will write to you, and I will be back before you know it. Be good for your father, and remember that I love you very much." "I love you too," Thomas whispered. Eleanor kissed his forehead and left the room before she broke down completely. She ran straight into the Earl in the hallway. He caught her arms to steady her. "Are you all right?" "Yes, my lord." Eleanor tried to pull away, but the Earl held on. He started, then stopped. His face was full of something that looked like pain. "I will miss you," he said finally. "Thomas will miss you. The house will be empty without you." Eleanor looked up at him. In the dim light, his eyes looked almost black. "I will miss you too, my lord," she whispered. "More than you know." For a moment they just stood there. The Earl's hands were still on her arms. Eleanor could feel the warmth of him through her sleeves. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. "Eleanor," the Earl said. It was the first time he had used her name without the title. "I need to tell you something. I cannot let you leave without—" But then a door opened downstairs. Mrs. Davies called up, "The carriage is ready for the morning, my lord." The moment broke. The Earl dropped his hands. He stepped back. "Yes, thank you, Mrs. Davies," he called back. When he looked at Eleanor again, his expression was closed. "Get some rest," he said. "You have a long journey tomorrow." He walked away. Eleanor stood alone in the dark hallway once more. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run after him and demand to know what he had been about to say. But she did not. Because she was a governess, and he was an earl, and there were rules that could not be broken. The next morning, Eleanor climbed into the carriage. Thomas and the Earl stood on the steps to see her off. Thomas was crying openly. The Earl's face was like stone. "Goodbye," Eleanor called. "Take care of each other." The carriage pulled away. Eleanor looked back until the house disappeared from view. Then she turned around and stared at her hands. She felt like she was leaving her heart behind. The month in London was awful. Eleanor's aunt put her to work immediately. There were endless errands to run, flowers to order, dresses to fit, invitations to write. Margaret treated her like a servant. The other cousins ignored her. "At least you are useful for something," her aunt said coldly. Eleanor wrote to Thomas every week. She told him about London. She sent him little drawings. She asked about his lessons and his father and the foal named Eleanor. Thomas wrote back in careful letters. He missed her terribly. Father was sad. The house was quiet. When was she coming home? Eleanor noticed that the Earl never added anything to the letters. He never sent his regards. He never asked how she was. It was like he had forgotten her completely. Her heart ached constantly. She had been foolish to think he cared. He had just been grateful for her help with his son. Now that she was gone, he had moved on with his life. But she could not move on. She thought about him every day, every night. She dreamed about the way he had looked at her in the hallway, the way he had said her name. She told herself to stop, but her heart would not listen. Finally, the wedding day arrived. It was a grand affair. Margaret looked beautiful. The Viscount looked proud. Eleanor stood at the back of the church in her plain grey dress and tried to feel happy for her cousin. After the ceremony, there was a ball. Eleanor helped serve. She carried trays and fetched drinks. No one asked her to dance. No one even noticed she was there. She was standing by the wall, exhausted, when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Excuse me, miss, but I believe this dance is mine." Eleanor spun around. The Earl of Ashford stood before her in full formal dress. He looked impossibly handsome. His dark hair was perfectly styled. His coat fit him like a glove. But his eyes were what held her. They burned with intensity. "My lord," Eleanor gasped. "What are you doing here?" "I came for you," the Earl said simply. He held out his hand. "Dance with me." Eleanor stared at his hand. "I cannot. I am not a guest. I am here to help. My aunt will be furious if—" "I do not care about your aunt," the Earl said. His voice was firm. "Dance with me, Eleanor." Eleanor looked around. People were staring. Her aunt was watching from across the room with a shocked expression. Margaret looked scandalized. Eleanor took his hand. "Yes, my lord." The Earl led her onto the dance floor. He pulled her into his arms. They began to waltz. Eleanor had not danced in years, but the Earl was a good partner. He led with confidence. "Why are you here?" Eleanor asked again. "How did you even know about the wedding?" "You wrote to Thomas," the Earl said. "You mentioned your cousin's wedding. You said the date, so I came." "But why?" The Earl looked down at her. His eyes were serious. "Because I have been miserable without you," he said. "Because Thomas has been miserable. Because the house is dark and empty. Because I realized something." Eleanor's heart pounded. "What did you realize?" "That I love you," the Earl said. "I have loved you since the day you stayed to bandage my son's arm. Since the day you disobeyed me and chose kindness over obedience. Since the day you showed me I could still be a father, still be a man, still be alive." Eleanor stopped breathing. "My lord, you cannot mean—" "I mean every word," the Earl said. He pulled her closer. Other dancers were definitely staring now. "I know I have no right to your affection. I have been a terrible employer. I was cold to you before you left. I let you go without fighting for you. I have been a coward." "You are not a coward," Eleanor whispered. "Yes, I am," the Earl said. "I was afraid of loving again, afraid of the pain. But this past month has taught me something. Living without love is worse than any pain. Living without you is worse than anything." Tears streamed down Eleanor's face. "I am just a governess. I have nothing. I am nothing." "You are everything," the Earl said fiercely. "You are kind and brave and wise. You brought my son back to me. You brought me back to myself. You made me believe in happiness again. How can you think you are nothing?" "Because everyone has always told me so," Eleanor said. Her voice broke. The Earl stopped dancing. Right there in the middle of the ballroom, he cupped her face in his hands. "Then everyone was wrong," he said. "You are worth more than all of them combined. You are worth more than titles and estates and empty social rules. You are the most valuable person I have ever met." Eleanor sobbed. "I love you too," she said. "I have been so miserable. I tried not to love you, but I could not help it." The Earl smiled. It was the most beautiful smile Eleanor had ever seen. "Then marry me," he said. "Come home with me. Be my wife. Be Thomas's mother. Be the mistress of Ashford Manor. Be my partner for the rest of my life." Eleanor could not speak. She just nodded and cried and nodded some more. The Earl kissed her right there in front of everyone. It was scandalous. It was improper. It was perfect. When they finally pulled apart, the ballroom was silent. Everyone was staring. Eleanor's aunt looked like she might faint. Margaret's mouth hung open. The Earl looked around at them all. "This woman is going to be my countess," he announced. "Anyone who has a problem with that can leave now." No one moved. No one dared. The Earl took Eleanor's hand and led her off the dance floor. They walked right out of the ballroom, out of the house, into his waiting carriage. "What about my things?" Eleanor asked. "I will buy you new things," the Earl said. "Better things. Everything you could possibly want." "I only want you," Eleanor said. "And Thomas." "You have us," the Earl promised. "Forever." They rode through the night back to Ashford Manor. The Earl held Eleanor's hand the entire time. He told her how miserable he had been, how he had paced the house like a ghost, how Thomas had cried every night, how he finally realized he could not live without her. "I was afraid you would refuse me," he admitted. "I was afraid you would think I was only offering marriage out of pity or convenience." "Never," Eleanor said. "I know you are a man of honor. You would not offer marriage unless you meant it." "I mean it with my whole heart," the Earl said. He kissed her hand. I want to grow old with you. I want to watch Thomas grow up with you by my side. I want to have more children if you are willing. I want to wake up every morning and see your face. I want to spend every night with you in my arms." Eleanor blushed. "That sounds like heaven." "It will be heaven," the Earl promised. When they arrived at Ashford Manor, dawn was breaking. Thomas was already awake. He must have been watching for them because he came running out of the house in his nightshirt. "Miss Eleanor, you came back! You came back!" Eleanor jumped out of the carriage and caught him in her arms. "I came back," she said, "and I am never leaving again." "Never?" Thomas looked up at her with hopeful eyes. "Never," the Earl confirmed. He came to stand beside them. He put his hand on Thomas's head. "Miss Eleanor is going to marry me. She is going to be your mama. Would you like that?" Thomas's face lit up like the sun. "Really? Truly?" "Really and truly," Eleanor said. Thomas hugged her so tight she could barely breathe. Then he hugged his father. Then he hugged them both together. "This is the best day ever!" he shouted. Mrs. Davies came out to see what the commotion was about. When she saw them all together, she burst into tears. "Thank the Lord," she said. "I was praying you would come back, Miss Eleanor. This house needs you. They need you." "And I need them," Eleanor said. The wedding was simple and quick. The Earl did not want to wait. They were married in the small church on his estate. Thomas stood beside them as the Earl slipped a ring on Eleanor's finger. "I love you," the Earl said. "My Eleanor, my wife, my home." "I love you," Eleanor said. "My husband, my heart, my everything." They kissed as man and wife. Thomas cheered. The servants who had gathered to watch clapped and cried happy tears. That night, the Earl brought Eleanor to his chambers. Their chambers now. He had had the room redecorated. The dark curtains were gone. Everything was light and bright. "I want no shadows anymore," he explained. "I want to live in the light with you." Eleanor touched his face. "You have given me everything," she said. "A home, a family, a name, love. I never thought I would have any of those things." "You have given me more," the Earl said. He pulled her close. "You gave me my son. You gave me my life. You gave me a reason to wake up in the morning. You saved me, Eleanor." "We saved each other," Eleanor said. The Earl kissed her tenderly. "Yes," he agreed. "We did." They made a life together, a beautiful, happy life. The Earl became the father he had always wanted to be. Thomas grew up strong and kind and loved. Eleanor transformed the house from a place of mourning into a place of joy. She was never just a governess again. She was a countess, a mother, a wife, a woman who knew her own worth. Sometimes she would remember that day when the Earl had given her 1 hour to pack. That terrible, frightening moment when she thought her life was over. And she would smile. Because she had spent that hour bandaging his son. And in doing so, she had bandaged both their wounded hearts. Years later, when Thomas was grown and married with children of his own, he would bring them to visit. Eleanor and the Earl would sit by the fire and watch their grandchildren play. The Earl would take Eleanor's hand and kiss it gently. "Do you remember the day we met?" he would ask. "I remember you storming into the nursery and ordering me to leave," Eleanor would say with a laugh. "And you disobeyed me," the Earl would say proudly. "You have been disobeying me ever since." "Only when you are being ridiculous," Eleanor would say. "Which is often," the Earl would admit. And they would laugh together. Two people who had been broken and lost. Two people who had found each other in the midst of pain. Two people who had built something beautiful out of the ruins. Eleanor never regretted staying that day. Never regretted choosing to bandage a wounded boy instead of packing her bags. Because that one choice had led to everything. To love, to family, to home. The Earl never regretted giving her that ultimatum, because her response had shown him who she really was, and he had spent the rest of his life thanking God for sending him such an angel. They lived long, happy lives, and when they finally died, old and gray and still holding hands. Their children and grandchildren mourned them. But they also celebrated them, because the Earl and his Countess had shown everyone what true love looked like. Love that chose kindness over self-preservation. Love that disobeyed cruel orders. Love that bandaged wounds, both physical and emotional. Love that transformed broken people into whole ones. Love that created a family where there had been only loneliness. And it all started with 1 hour. One choice. One woman who stayed.